All right. Welcome everyone. I hope you can hear me and us all right. Hopefully you can see our screens. We are going to give folks the customary kind of minute or two to join us. We've got a bunch of awesome folks presenting, sharing knowledge with you today. I think it's going to be really, really fun. The way we're going to do this, we're going to give you all, again, another minute. Grab water, use the bathroom, whatever you need to do. We're then going to do a quick overview slide deck that will tie some of these folks together and kind of tie the narrative that we want to discuss today together. And we all got a chance to sync earlier this week. And I really do think there's going to be some very fun things for folks to learn. We're then going to step through kind of introductions, questions, etc. And we'll try to wrap in 50 minutes. In fact, we will. Chance to go a minute or two over, but I promise to let us go a little bit early. And otherwise, should you have questions today, should things come up, we have an active chat window. That means we have teammates watching the chat window. They can highlight things. I'll be keeping an eye on it too. So if you have a question for a specific speaker, let me know. I'll try to get it to them. After today's presentation, the video will be available pretty darn soon. You should have an email about, in fact, with the video link right away. We'll send kind of the highlights later as well. And other than that, excited to dive in. I'm going to wait till my clock clicks over to 11:03, and then we're going to go. So hopefully everyone's having a great week. Hopefully you're excited about today. I really am. And yeah, we are. Also, fun to see a bunch of friends in the audience. If you do feel like saying your name, where you're from, etc., I bet everyone on stage here knows at least one of you. So yeah, feel free to drop a quick hello from where you are, who you are. If you want to say hi to anyone, if you want to say hi to Dougie Fresh, Colvire, Omer, John, great time to do so now. Okay, we're live. I'm going to share my screen for a second here. And I want to go to this window here. So here's what we're covering today. What we're really calling consumer convergence. And a lot of the folks here are in the short-term rental space. Some of you are probably in the medium and potentially long-term rental space as well. However, what is probably very likely happening on a couple of different asset types in the real estate space we're seeing convergence of how these assets can be used and flex across categories. We've got a bunch of experts on this here today. Joining Wheelhouse is Zeus, Nespic, Rentals United. And again, for a little more framing, we believe accommodations, residential real estate are converging. There's a whole bunch of data for this. We've fun to debate this with folks on the stage today, but as we've often said, new hospitality models seem to be emerging everywhere. We think they're really good and important to know. And also another big change, kind of acceleration of the category that we think is important for people to know, and a lot of people on stage can speak to this as well, is institutional capital is flooding in. And that means we see both single family homes, multifamily buildings, all increasingly coming over to this kind of mixed hospitality world. So the folks we have today who are going to do proper intros in just a second, we've got Colvire from Zeus. Colvire and I have probably known each other 6 years at this point. Super thoughtful individual. Omer, CEO of Nespic. You guys are going to learn a ton from Omer. Really interesting insights, really fast growing team. Really a service you need to know about. Very interesting. Doug and John are both amazing individuals as well. Doug's at Rentals United. John is my teammate here at Wheelhouse. Both have been in this category for 5 years. They'll share more of their story in a second, but people who know the short, medium, and long-term space from a ton of different directions. Again, excited. Our job, we get to host. For those who don't know Wheelhouse, our shameless 1-minute plug here. We're software to enable dynamic pricing, market reports, and comp sets. Yada, yada, yada. We do everything based on a whole bunch of really fun data science. We are not going to be talking too much about that today. But if you do want to learn more, you know where to reach us. And really now, with that, on to the show. Let me stop sharing my screen for a second, and we should all be live. Okay.
Looks like Andrew might have closed his his thing.
I think he just exited in a very fashionable way.
No, I'm joking. Okay, I'm back. You're right. My mistake. You'd think I would know this platform by now. No, yes. So we're back. We're live. So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna do quick intros. And then we'll dive into questions. Intro order. We're actually gonna have Colvir, you go first, then Omer, then Doug and John. If you could please tell us who you are, who you're working with, what is your relationship to this inventory type, medium and long-term stays, and how do you think about either market opportunity or market size? Okay, Colvir, please take it away.
Thank you, Andrew. Nice to meet everyone. So my name is Kulveer Tagore. I'm the CEO of Zeus. We are an operator. We're in the 30-day plus market, so we're not a short-term rental operator. We're across the US. We have about 1,300 units right now. And as Andrew mentioned, known him for about 5 or 6 years. So I'm the CEO. And apologies for my background. I had a baby boy a few weeks ago, and so I'm working out of the nursery. So, we got into this business a little bit more on the property management side, especially targeted around sort of single family housing inventory. We did grow into working with multifamily partners across the country. And then we did also want to just, we had an eye on what maybe people call the midterm rental market from years ago, because we had this view that people were just becoming more mobile. Signing a 12-month lease in an unfurnished unit was a bit anachronistic for how people's tastes and preferences are evolving. So the idea was, let's make it easy for people to live well wherever they want to. And as we got into the market, we started seeing lots and lots of business travel, and that's where we really focused pre-pandemic. And we just saw firsthand this emergence of basically people moving around whilst they're working. Now, the pandemic really accelerated this shift to remote work. And in our own data, when we survey Zeus residents, about 75% of them say they work from home. Now, of course, this may change as the country reopens. But I remember about a year ago, looking at our data, Los Angeles as a market for us really took off. The homes we tend to have, they're in the suburbs, they have a little bit more space. And it's been really interesting to just see how I think this segment of the market has really, really expanded. And Andrew, coming to your point about how we think about the market opportunity, the way we actually look at it is, if you look at the long-term rental market, I think in the US, it's about, 500 billion per year is spent on rent. What we then look at is our target markets and metros and cities, and then the type of inventory that fits, and then the type of owners that would want to work with us. And we come right around that sort of 150 billion sort of market opportunity. Of course, it is growing. So we think it's very, very large, and we're still very much in the early innings. But we think the overall market is just going to become a lot more fluid. And people are going to sort of shift in between staying long-term, medium-term, and short, medium, and long-term throughout their careers.
Do you think of yourself as a real estate company or an accommodation/hospitality company, or some mix of both?
Yeah, I would like to think of us as a technology company, of course, but I'd probably put us more on, I'd say, the hospitality side. So, we try and abstract away the real estate side for the residents. And so, they book with Zeus, everything works, can be customized for working from home. You can be mobile and move around. But we love working with real estate companies and taking on assets, and maybe it's a percentage of the inventory that they want to put into this segment of the market. So we think of ourselves as an operator, and we work with real estate partners, and then we have our residents and businesses that look for accommodation through us.
Some of the other things you've learned from your customers at some point, but thank you for the intro. Awesome. Omer, please take it away.
Hi. First of all, I got to say that I stayed in one of the Zeus apartments, Zeus houses in San Francisco, in a Trinity building, Trinity SF building. Like, I think they even had a nice ground coffee ready for me on the check-in. So I think it was just like more on the hospitality side rather than just offering real estate month-to-month rentals. So everyone, I'm Omer. I'm I'm the CEO of Nestpick, and Nestpick has always focused on month-to-month rentals. So we've been doing this for more than 5 years now. So we started doing it before it was cool. And the main reason was actually I happened to live in 3 different countries and 6 different cities. I lived in both sides of the United States, in SF and New York. And we also have an office in Berlin. So basically every time I moved, like the biggest hassle was finding an accommodation. Like you don't know how long you're gonna stay. You don't wanna sign up for a long-term lease. The short-term providers or hotels are getting too expensive, and actually, to be honest, too depressing if you stay for more than 10 days at a time. So this was already particularly important for like corporate travelers, consultants, expatriates like me, or international students. So we wanted to build a platform aggregating all offers, because it's also extremely local, regional provider focused. So it's every market has its own provider network. So we started like that. Currently, we are integrating around 245 different providers, and we have around 2.75 million month-to-month lease listings on our DB. So we kind of built the largest flex supply, and all our demand is also directed to this market. We were thinking that the market size, like we were estimating the market size to be around 190 billion on 2019. And I think in Airbnb S1, they estimate this as 210 billion. And looking at the similar web visits and the demand on Airbnb and other providers for the monthly stays, we see around 40% year-on-year growth. So it's kind of dwarfed 210 billion between 2 multi-trillion markets like long-term leases and the vacation rentals, but it's expanding into both sides and growing in extreme rates at the moment. And I think even if it cools down to 4% global travel growth rates in the next 3 to 4 years, it just means that this is going to be a $500 billion market by the next 10 years. So I think it's huge. And I think
let me dig in.
It's about time that people think about this market more and more.
Yeah. So you're saying, okay, so Nestpick, more than 2 million midterm properties available for rent. Yeah. Tell us just a little bit more, like when you see that growth, is it coming from long-term properties, from long-term rentals that are shifting over and offering this new kind of stay product? Is it short-term rentals that are including this inventory, or kind of like looking to their far future to bring chunks of inventory online? Tell us a little bit more about the breakdown of who's coming to work with you right now.
Okay, so let me talk a little bit about historically. Historically, the corporate housing was already an offline business in a different silo, and it was already happening. But then I think some of the larger urban areas started regulating some urban areas, like in San Francisco, in New York, or in Berlin, or in London. Like you could only do up to 90 days a year if you're leasing the entire apartment on vacation rentals. So some of those mom and pop landlords first started doing this. In summer in Berlin, I'm doing daily stays, increasing my basically revenues and margins. But after it's September or October, I'm going to rent this unit for 4 to 5 months at a time. First, it's winter time. No one comes to Berlin or New York that much. Second, regulatory pressure just allows me to do it nicely. And I think what's happening now with the pandemic, the professionally managed inventory, like some multifamily operators like Avalon or Iconic Capital, they are also professionally entering with their own flexible rentals brands. So I may say now it's coming from both ends.
We're going to have to click on that later too, because I think that's a really important trend for people to understand that, yes, Avalon, the Greystars of the world, et cetera, are all looking, in some cases, the people on stage here in partnership or in collaboration. I'm back. What, John, where did we lose me? That's
About
good.
a sentence.
Dougie Fresh. Okay. You know what? That's good. Dougie Fresh, your turn to intro yourself, Reynolds United, etc.
Sure. Sure. Yeah. Thanks. And thanks again, Andrew, for having me on this. And really excited to be here talking with all these brilliant minds. My name is Doug Truitt. I'm head of revenue success for Rentals United. We are a channel manager by trade for what we've done. But with my role as revenue success, we decided to bring something else to the channel management world and connectivity world within tech and software, which is, a lot of folks have rushed to get in the space and channel management with regards to like just turning listings and channels on, and just thinking bookings are going to come in. But the reality is there's a lot more nurturing and massaging that needs to happen with those types of channels and connectivity. So my role has come in to create a few features and products, and advise and consult with some of our clients to help them do better and get more bookings, conversions, and just actually perform better and save some time and get things going better. The one thing that's really prevalent in the space is conversion needs to be given more attention to. You can't just set it and forget it. And there's a lot that needs to happen in terms of different strategies. I would say that, really my experience in the past, I worked with John at Stay Alfred, which was a urban downtown vacation rental or apartment company. Obviously in the lease kind of arbitrage model that did not do well for a COVID timeframe. So the company did fall to COVID. But I had a great experience there. I was a senior director of distribution. Got to see the company when I started at 180 properties to all the way to 3,000 properties in about a 4.5 year span, which was really exciting to see and be a part of. Mostly just because you get to learn a lot about the space and you get to learn a lot about how to strategize with things that are going on. Prior to that, I was 19 years in the hotel industry side of it. So I have a lot of that experience and perspective as well. I think what's interesting about midterm and long-term kind of starts back to my Stay Alfred days, which I'm sure John can relate to, but we actually experimented with some of the early players in some of the long-term channels or midterm channels that were starting to come on. Like we were one of the first clients at the time to get on with anyplace.com, if anybody knows them. And it was an interesting experience to kind of build that from the ground up and actually see that there was a corporate traveler segment that was developing. And at Stay Alfred, we actually built a corporate travel team or a group sales team that actually went out and tried to pick off some of that hotel group travel that was happening, and actually submit RFPs to convention visitor bureaus and actually see what kind of business we could attain. And there was definitely a spot for that in the space that really helped out a lot of companies, because a lot of companies had people at the time traveling a ton for work and needed places to actually sit and be in an actual at-home kind of feel rather than being in a 300 square foot hotel room. So it was an interesting perspective to have that. And now adding to that with my experience at Reynolds United, I'm actually able to see, which by the way, Reynolds United is connected with Nespic and Omir there. We enjoy, and Zeus living as well. And we enjoy the partnerships because it actually brings a lot more offerings to our clients to diversify their strategy with distribution and get out on some other areas. It's really interesting to see, I think, from where John and I were at Stay Alfred before and seeing when things were kind of getting going with more of this long-term kind of thought and strategy, to now see a lot of channels emerging out of it, as well as a lot more clientele starting to think about, I need to have my short term, but I also should be advertising on midterm and long term, because all those areas provide some revenue stream that are tangible and worth the squeeze, so to speak. So yeah. I'll cut it off there and let get the other introductions if you want, or if you have a question.
Yeah, we're gonna do JDR and then we're gonna get to a few questions because we'll wrap it up. Jen, you want to do a 1 minute quick hello and then we'll dive in?
Hi, my name's John. I'm the head of enterprise sales with Wheelhouse. Prior to joining Wheelhouse, I was a revenue management consultant in the space and did most of my experience in the industry with Stay Alfred as their head of revenue. Really excited to have this conversation. As Doug kind of said, with Stay Alfred, we kind of saw the importance, and as a revenue manager, we saw this trend coming, but the connectivity and actually doing it, operationalizing it was really difficult. COVID has definitely accelerated that. We're seeing a lot of opportunities, and I think having this conversation is going to be a lot of fun.
Excellent. Love it. Okay, excellent. Thanks all. Here's what we're going to do. tons to learn. What I always love asking people is tell me something that is non-obvious, but once I hear it, it's undeniable. And you all work deeply in this space. You know it really, really well. So we're going to go around the horn and we're going to ask you what is non-obvious about our category, about kind of midterm and long-term stays. But once you see it, again, is undeniable. Same order, Colvier, you first. Take it away. Non-obvious to undeniable.
Yeah, I think maybe it's becoming obvious now, but I truly think this remote work revolution that we're going through, it's a lot bigger than people realize, and it's going to persist. For a while, it felt like this was just a temporary thing that we'd all adjust to. But I think more and more companies are learning that employees really want it. And, you can read in the press stories about people saying, hey, they're going to quit their jobs if they're forced back to the office. And they're willing to look for new jobs and even trade some salary for that flexibility and convenience. So I think, and the data that we see, really supports that. Within Zeus, we have this concept of a flexible lease where there's no real end date that some people sign up with. And we've seen a 6x increase in that since 2019. And then if we look at our length of stay, including extensions, pre-pandemic, we were at about 96 days, and in 2021, we're at 129 days. So you can see this data about how many people are actually moving. I think Microsoft as well recently did a big survey, I think of about 30,000 employees. And I think 46% of employees said they want to move, if they're allowed to continue to work remotely. And then, Facebook have come out and said, but I think it's 2030, they expect half of the company to be remote. So I think it's here to stay. If you just look at the history of technology, it's all about driving convenience, flexibility, and it makes us, sort of pure subscribers. And then the other thing related to that is during the pandemic, we started working with some short-term operators because we're really good at this corporate demand. We're really good at this 30-day plus demand. And the pricing, getting the pricing right for midterm stays, it's actually not as simple as you just take the nightly rate and you multiply it by 30. You're not going to get much conversion. So we saw that there's actually a decent amount of education you've got to do in this seasonality, and obviously everyone knows that in all these different markets. But pricing for this midterm segment, if you're new to it, is its own thing that you're going to have to learn and conquer. And so we've done a lot of education for a lot of players on just helping them understand that how the price should shift from the either the long-term rate or the nightly rate for this 30-day plus segment.
Seasonality. Do you see the seasonality to the same extremes as a traditional hospitality business, or have you found it to be more muted?
I think it's a little bit less intense than pure short term. And what's interesting is we expanded into Miami last year, and then you can get counter seasonal markets where that's where everyone goes in the winter. And LA, I remember the first year we were in LA, we completely got the pricing wrong because it's just not as much of a peak in the summer and a drop in the winter. People are there year round. If anything, again, it's counter cyclical like Miami. So that said, when business travel was back, places like the Bay Area, prices could 2-3x, they would go insanely high in the summer, and that's also dampened now. And I think as business travel comes back, it'll probably come back in a slightly different flavor. Maybe that will bring a little bit more of that seasonal pressure back. But right now, I think it is more muted than short-term pricing.
That this is not a fad. This is the future of how people will live. And I think whether it's the emergence of internet connectivity even more easily everywhere and so many other technologies, I agree. And I think it's a very good thesis that this is here to stay and people need to start thinking about how to work it in to a portfolio or a business plan. John, you want to hop in? Yeah, fire away.
Can I say something on that? Yeah. I think as part of the interesting thing about this convergence too is that where before some of these different segments were siloed, you do have consumers that are able to see all the different kind of product segmentations at the same time, and they're actively doing it. Whether or not they had experience going to corporate providers before, they may still do that, but they're still going to look on Airbnb or Booking.com. And there's also an opportunity for the midterm stays to incorporate some of the demand signals that we're very used to in the short term as well. So there's that added element of pricing as well, as not only do you have to price a little different to to optimize your mid and long-term stay, but you also have the opportunity to take advantage of some of the short-term trends. You know, if market's going to sell out because of a concert, that's going to restrict the availability of properties on the long-term side as well.
Think about distribution strategy. I usually kind of default into a, hey, in the far future, try to capture really long bookings, and as stay dates approach, you can maybe fill in gap nights or fill in short stays, or optimize revenue when more people are booking last minute. How do you all think about it? How do you advise people on distribution or revenue strategies to maximize kind of the value of these potential medium or long-term stays?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting component, obviously, that is really starting to become more prevalent. But really, what plays into it is, you know, property managers, both big and large, and, you know, enterprise. We've even seen some real estate companies with leasing staff that are actually starting to get into the space and trying to say, I got unused inventory that I can't rent out and can't you know, sell for a 6 month. I'm trying to figure out how to make some ancillary revenue. So they're even getting into the space. But what I think is interesting about what you said is that people really need to understand what their product is and what their inventory is. Is the one that the one property they're gonna sell, is it possible to do 30 plus day stays in it? And is it something that's attractive enough? Do you have all the right things that are gonna make sense for that type of a traveler? Or is it something that's really more suited for the short-term part? I think if you have something that fits all of those needs for short-term, mid-term, and long-term, I think it becomes a strategy of saying, okay, I'm going to list on all these channels where I can accommodate to those specific type of guests, and then utilize my best judgment, maybe with some of the mid and long terms that maybe operate from like an inquiry standpoint, or they need to actually fill out some more rigorous contracts in order to stay with you in that situation, because maybe the building you're in, or the property, or the HOA, or wherever you're at, has some restrictions on doing that. So maybe you can actually, you know, mitigate that by not having it be as much of an instant book thing, but more of a real partnership and relationship with that client. You can find the right fit for them. Whereas a short term, obviously, instant book will take up your stuff. So I think the strategy there is, one, isolating, understanding what your property is capable of doing. Does it meet all those check boxes that some of those channels and those types of customers that are looking to travel for either, you know, a midterm or a long-term stay are going to want? I think, you know, Collier was talking about the emergence and the actual solidification of having actual nomads. You know, the nomadic traveler thing is a real thing. Well, if that's going to happen, they can kind of fit somewhat in the midterm section, where they're going to do 30, maybe even 60 days and then move on to another city. But what are the key things they need? They need really high-speed Wi-Fi. So if you have a property, you need to make sure you got high-speed Wi-Fi. If you don't, get on it, because it'll pay dividends being attracted to that person. They can use things in distribution strategy for different channels and put up, I've seen people putting up pictures of speed tests on the internet inside the unit to actually showcase, hey, I've got fast Wi-Fi, and that will help influence the conversion. There's other components, like, you know, Amir was talking about how Zeus had a fresh cup of coffee ready for him or something. Partnerships with different types of pleasantries that make people feel more at home. Like, you have to really assess your property inventory and style, and actually then advertise and component to that on each of the channels to make it there. And then I think, you know, like John was saying, there's also considerations with rates and the strategies you're going to do with that too. How do you decide to mark up your rate or downplay your rate, or maybe you create a different rate feed that you can try and feed to a Zeus Living or an SPIC or an anyplace.com or some kind of like that, versus what you're going to do on your strategy with your real-time demand pickup on Airbnb or whatever. So yeah. And I think that answers it.
Yeah, and I think from Collier, what we're hearing is like, look, this is here to stay. Massive opportunities happening in the suburbs, right? You're seeing adoption in the suburbs, which is different than what some people might think. Secondly, yes, if you're interested in this inventory type, you need to think about your distribution strategy a little bit different. Omer, coming to you on the merchandising side, let's say I was interested in attracting these medium-term, longer-term guests, right? People staying with me for a month up to 4+ months. What do I need to do? How am I going to make my place? Doug was talking about it a little bit. What else do I need to do? What are the best operators do when trying to merchandise the supply to capture this type of traveler?
Wow, this is a great question. I think Doug already mentioned that like Wi-Fi is extremely important, but also I think I stayed in 7 different apartments in, like, I don't know, 6 different cities for more than 1 month. I think the neighborhood, the surrounding area, the amenities around the neighborhood is as important, if not more important than pricing. Because like, think of this. You can stay in Tenderloin for a few days if you're just visiting San Francisco as a tourist. But you don't want to stay there for a few months and increase your probability of getting robbed on the street, right? So let's be honest about it. So the monthly rentals units need to be like well thought, location, like the long-term stays, but gives much more yield than them. So that's how that's how I see.
Interesting. So, but through photos and narrative building, you should tell the story of your neighborhood, of your local area, almost even more so than the maybe convenience of access.
Exactly. So the description of the property, I think it's a little bit overlooked, but many people, they usually read the description up and down. And if you're going to stay in that unit for 2 months, it's like 95%, 99% of the chances the descriptions are read thoroughly. So I think the short-term operators, instead of just sticking to cozy, nice unit in the heart of Manhattan, they need to have a much more descriptive description of the property itself.
I'd like to add to that too, because I think a really, really relevant thing you're hitting on, though, Amir, is that like, let's look at the traditional, statistics of like what they said about converting people in the short-term space, or maybe even the hotel. It's like on average, people would spend like, 30, 40 hours or something like that, searching for a vacation or whatever to do that. They visit, some routine 8 and 10 sites before they actually convert and they actually make bookings. So what does that translate into the midterm and long-term segmentation? I mean, I know that if I'm looking for a place that I'm going to spend a month or 2 months to stay at, I'm going to spend more time and effort, energy, really researching that it's going to be the right fit for me. So I think what you're hitting on is a really great aspect, which is sharpen up your content, make sure it is as best as possible. I've even heard of things like people partnering with like Open Table to get like gift card credits that are incentivizing people to choose them because they can actually use it at local restaurants nearby where they're going to be at. Or maybe you could even partner with Uber Eats or Grubhub or something where you actually provide
or a co-working space around your neighborhood. I think the office spaces are having trouble, and there's a couple of different co-working spaces in Soho. I know they're offering up to 1 week for free for anyone that stays in, for instance, Nesbitt properties. So like not our properties, of course, our providers' properties, but I think these kind of engagements matter a lot. And because of this, Nesbitt shows the exact location of the listings on our detail page. And we also work with third-party tools. So we pull in the crime rate information, public transport information, as well as the neighborhood scores, because this experience of staying in a city for more than a month is much more different than just a couple of days touristic stay. Where your schedule is already full, right? You know which part of the city that you're gonna be in. Whereas this type of stays is a whole different vertical. So a lot happens on Airbnb, but actually as a product, they don't show the exact location of the listings. They don't have anything about the neighborhood details or only few information. Whereas those kind of things may matter a lot when people are going to stay for a couple of months at a time.
I've got a follow up for a couple of you, and then John, I'm going to come to you for another question here. So I'm hearing a lot about, hey, these longer term stays are often attracting work from home folks or corporate travelers, et cetera. Are you all starting to see, are companies paying part of the bill, or is this the individual paying the bill? How are people? Who's the actual payee for your service, for your offering here, and how is that starting to? And John, I want to come to you because I want your opinion on how that might impact pricing dynamics. But Colvir, Omer, Doug, anyone, what are you all seeing specifically around like who's paying for this?
Knows that better than me.
I can take a shot to start with. So interestingly, I think there was this headline that came out recently about startups are spending more on Airbnb than on offices. So I think if you look at early stage companies, definitely I think the companies are paying for it. When you want to get people to co-locate, maybe if you're just offering it as a perk. Now at the enterprise segment, of course, if it's a relocation or business travel, the companies are going to pay for it. I think that pure sort of we're helping enable this remote lifestyle. I think it's still pretty early and we're not seeing a lot of corporate payees, to be honest. But I know there are companies that are thinking of it as a perk or a budget, per year to give you a month or a few months. And so we're definitely seeing it with the startups. And generally coming from the startup world, you can always sort of extrapolate forward that if this is what the early stage companies are doing today, as they grow and become larger, then companies. I think the other data point I saw was startups. I think 40% of founders are choosing to be fully distributed and remote first from the start, from the get-go. And so if you again look at that 5 years forward from now, there's going to be a lot of companies that are fully distributed. Probably the companies are contributing something, or at least when they co-locate, they'll be paying. So I think that's a very interesting trend to watch. And then, of course, I think just very simply on the pricing side, if companies are paying, they obviously want to make sure the experience is good and worth it. And so I think the budgets are higher. And we also see the demographic of pure nomads, on the other hand, who are on an extreme budget, and they basically want to make their dollars go as far as possible. And so I think that will be an interesting shift.
Yeah, I think that's so cool. And I actually think for customers of Wheelhouse, who most of our customers are targeting more of the short-term stay, right? What I think is really, really interesting, what you just highlighted, is a new channel or a new way to think about how you take your low season and you go and work with one of the partners here, or you go directly to companies and say, hey, we're set up to host your employees for multiple months. And if people are near if these places happen to be near family members or others, there's just like a really cool new marketing avenue, especially for those low seasons what people are trying to fill. That's I think emerging on the backs of all the work you all are doing. JDR, just like you're hearing all this and chewing on it, obviously you thought about this stuff for a long time. How are you thinking about pricing strategy as you hear all this?
Let me, I'll give you my conclusion, but I'm going to try and draw like a little bit of a narrative to you, because the non-obvious but undeniable, I think, in this convergence is kind of the 1 + 1 = 3 kind of situation. And for the revenue manager, the question is moving away from what segment are you going to target to when are you going to target a segment and how much of it are you going to take on? Because consumers now, in the past, they would have been like, oh, I need to find a corporate rental. I'm going to go to a corporate rental company. They may still do that, but they're also probably going to go on Airbnb or Booking.com, and they're going to look around. And when they're looking around, they'll probably, I imagine, do something similar to I do, which is, oh, this place looks really cool. Maybe I'll come back here. So they're also opening up what they're looking at. But I think what's going to happen is you have, as these things kind of come together, you have like excellent operators like Zeus, and they are asking themselves, we have these assets, how do we grow and how do we make more money on them? And that's going to drive different ways of merchandising, different ways to capitalize on the assets. They're going to try to figure that out, and they're going to push that forward. Then you have these specialized channels like NestPick, and there's a really big opportunity here because the big channels have opened up this capability for everyone, but you can't really contact them, and they're casting a wide net. So they're not going to adjust a lot of what they're doing to fit your needs. But as Omer said, these channels are equipped to provide the information specific to that segment that really makes them able to buy it. They're also able to provide options that the bigger channels might not have, like additional description fields or things very specific to their segment that you can then specifically advertise to on those channels. And that allows them to really create a lot of options and increase the value proposition for the specific segment that they're targeting. And then you have channel managers like Rentals United, where they really enable the adoption of that specialized optionality. We know that in the space, tech stacks are really complex. There's a lot of gaps in connectivity. That's what Stay Alfred had to struggle with, is we had these ideas, but we couldn't get it from point A to point B. So the channel managers allow them to take this optionality on these channels and allow the property managers to use it in a way that's efficient and can fit with their tech stacks. So altogether, you're essentially getting to the point where the revenue manager no longer is like, we could do this, but I don't know how to do that. And it's all becomes an option of like, okay, When do I want to take long-term stays? When do I want to take short-term stays? When is that the best opportunity for me? And then how much am I going to do? Do I want to take more risk, less risk? And those all become business decisions now instead of technical problems to work out.
Yeah, I really like that a lot. And I think another thing to consider too, there's two points I wanted to make. One is would like to add to Kulveer with, something to look out for too is, I don't know if you guys are familiar with, the audience is familiar with like Concur or Agencia, but they are very much for the business side of it, not the inventory, but for the business side of it. They are that corporate travel management type platform where people have budgets that get approved. Can they sit in first class on a plane or economy? They have a whole approval standards, all that stuff for these big companies. And up until a certain point, those guys had been like, your company has to do $1 million worth of travel a year to be eligible to even have that account, so that you could actually have access to the full Expedia Group inventory segments and all that other stuff, GDS and whatever with Concur. And I think that's something to look out for within the nomadic traveler, becoming something that they're preferring Airbnb, or they're preferring more vacation rental, STR, midterm, long-term stuff within the vacation rental space, to look out for that, to actually for some companies to come out and play, to help companies manage that travel better, specifically cater to the vacation rental, because Agencia and Concur have still yet to really get into the short-term rental space as far as full homes and apartments and things like that. They really relied on those inventory sources in the GDS and inside Expedia and that kind of thing. So that's one to look out for. The second part is kind of with what John's saying. I think another thing that's going to be coming out soon and that we need to really be kind of aware to is when you have a short-term rental that you can sell as short-term, but you also want to sell it as midterm or as long-term, you're going to start dealing with availability potential issues of where you're going to potentially like black out certain dates because you want to hold off for midterm to long-term. And there are potential impacts that happen to your short-term channels that if you're not giving full availability, you get downplayed in search algorithms. So there is a very big kind of coming to head, so to speak, with these all merging and converging together, that somebody's going to have to start trying to figure out how to adapt to it with all the different types of eyeballs and impressions you're trying to get on your product when you fit multiple different niches, because they can't be siloed anymore. They're actually starting to come together. And so we're going to have to, as a community in the vacation rental space, we're going to have to figure that out to push the channels to all be kind of good players and ambassadors within that.
Yeah. Excellent point, especially about the distribution challenges. If you're not listed on certain places, how it can penalize other aspects of your business. Super important things that we could probably spend a whole session on. Okay. We're at 7 minutes to go. And because we're going to let everyone out at 50 after 10 minutes before the hour here. Question for you all. I come from the world where ADR and occupancy / RevPAR, these are the things I really care about. What are the non-obvious metrics I need to think about? Or what's another metric that you all think about for how to evaluate the effectiveness of your longer term or these midterm stays? And also, if anyone can share a little bit more about who the guest is that's coming to stay with us too. I'd be deeper than business traveler. I'd be curious to hear more about that as well. Who wants to take it away?
So can I ask a question? Because you are the expert in pricing. And I always thought that part of the P&L game of the short-term rental stay is ADR and the top line. But there's also operational costs like check-in, check-out processes, maintenance and cleaning. And then there's also the commission rate that you pay to the vendor. And I think Booking.com, Airbnb is just in the end captures around 15% of the top line. And when you do a few months at a time, check in and check out, I assume that it may increase the operational load. So I think one part of the monthly stays that's beneficial is you can advertise your listings in a platform like ours, where you get to pay less commission, have a larger basket rate, and less operational cost. But I really don't have enough, let's say, data literacy to understand what would be the final margin impact on having less ops and giving less commission. So I think in terms of pricing and ADRs, I think we should always need to think about like we're doing this to make money, and to make money you need to let go of all your costs and look at the net margin. And monthly stays may have comparable margins because of this savings on several other fronts.
Yeah, I think you're getting at exactly what I was going to mention, which is and John and I talked about it on one of our podcasts we do, which is called Rev Bites. If anybody wants to go look at it, it's really fun. We just talk about stuff we've learned from our failures and successes at Stay Alfred and kind of carried it forward. But I think what you're talking about, Omer, is cost par. So it's a metric that kind of John and I were talking about, and we always tried to figure out how to do this at Stay Alfred, which was you have RevPAR, which is, for those that don't know, is revenue per available room, or in the vacation rental space with key level inventory, it's more like revenue per available night. But what that is just saying, of all your available nights you had to sell, what was the total revenue you got regardless of your occupancy? Because RevPAR is king in understanding what kind of top line you got from it. But like you said, Omar, it doesn't really take into consideration your costs or maybe some of your bigger costs. So if you can, as a company, and we did this in the hotel industry, which is we had a cost per occupied night, which basically said for internally at a hotel or a franchise, it said, hey, like I still remember the number, it was $27.61 at the Red Lion Hotel that I managed in Spokane. And it was like, you had to make sure that you had, 3X of your cost per occupied night in order to make sure that you were getting margin out of it. So you knew from a revenue management perspective, or on the same day arrival type thing, booking, that you could actually drop your rate to a certain place, and that's as low as you could go in order to make sure that you were not compromising some margin off of your cost par. Now that takes into consideration your linen cost, your labor cost, your amenities and things like that cost to occupy that room. And I think in the vacation rental space, we need to look out for that kind of metric and start trying to develop that in some way, whether it's a rent to revenue, whether it's a overhead of turn for the housekeeping aspect, supplies, but some kind of number that actually can be attributed to the cost bar, so that you have a barrier of where you can't go below something, so that when you mark up rates or you do things, you actually have something to kind of bounce off of.
I think it's especially relevant in just the current environment we're in, but we look at days booked ahead just as a sort of signal on confidence, right? And it's so interesting, when the pandemic happened, that shrunk. People were only booking a week or two ahead, and then then we see it triple and expand as confidence comes back. And then related to that, so that's like days booked before, I guess, the stay starts. But then also just the search patterns associated with that, like how far into the future are people searching? And so maybe that one is obvious, but we look at that as just a gauge on, what is sentiment, and like how do we have to adapt our pricing and occupancy targets based on the behavior that people are having and showing.
It's probably the first time you'd seen really near close-in booking windows for these month-plus stays was during COVID, and now is it returned back above what it was before? Are we cresting even farther out of the okay?
Yeah, it has. Although we did see something like, I think it was mid-August, maybe. I don't know if it's Delta variant or the return to the office being a little bit delayed for some companies. We saw a slight weakening in a couple of markets, but overall, it's nowhere near as bad as it was, a year and a half ago. It's doing pretty good.
JDR, last word, and then we'll wrap.
Yeah, from the pricing perspective, and we might go over a minute, I'm sorry. I think it can even be a little bit more simple than the cost side, because coming from the STR kind of into the mid-long term, it might be a little different for the other way around. As a revenue manager, I think a lot about vacancy, right? Like where you're going to increase your RevPAR the most by adding occupancy than increasing ADR generally. Until you don't have any room to add occupancy, then you need to increase ADR. And so when I was working at Stay Alfred, what we did when we were really working with this kind of sales team is we spent a lot of time teaching that sales team about how our seasonality worked and where we were going to have we were forecasting consistent vacancy. And we were like, focus on this. because we can give you substantial discounts on our rack rate because we're already absorbing so much vacancy in our RevPAR. And so as you look at these kind of opportunities for you to kind of mix and match, you want to look at your seasonality and you got to ask the question, am I going to make more money on short term, or is long term going to actually increase my overall RevPAR because I have vacancy? And then that's a decision in pricing, because you can offer a lot better value proposition on long term where you have vacancy, but you might really, it's not that you want to not take those stays in like a high season, it's that you want to keep the rate in parity so you don't give up money. And in some cases that cost part affects you. You might be making money on your cleaning or your turns, or you may need to stabilize your staffing, so it is a risk to take too many long terms. You usually want some for stability, but you need to make that decision about your kind of portfolio and how much risk you're going to take. Then there's other factors too, which is we know the last couple of years have been extremely volatile. If you're able to develop contracts on long-term and short-term that have different cancellation policies, maybe you want to take some long-term just to stabilize your risk in a volatile environment. And then I think that goes into situations where like Reynolds United and the channels themselves like NestPick really have an opportunity. You're not going to have all this differentiation option on the big channels, and they're not going to work to fit your model. But these niche channels may be able to make functions where you can adjust your rate offering based on time period, or adjust your cancellation period based on time period. So you can really tailor your offering to the kind of risk profile you're trying to have in your company. And I think that's really where the biggest opportunity goes, because the channels, those niche channels that are really developing a value proposition for that specific customer segment, can offer things that allow users to take advantage of it. And then Reynolds United and channel managers that have the resources to really focus on the channels are actually going to be giving you the tools to implement them, because that's probably the most difficult part. Is the channels themselves may have tools, but you also need to be able to operate those optionality like efficiently for a portfolio.
The 50 minutes. So first guest, thank you so much. Awesome to hang with you. I know 2 weeks ago on this webinar, we actually talked about how technology and kind of remote services were enabling all these new type of hospitality offerings to emerge. What we were really excited about today was to also illustrate there's this entire new customer. There's an entire new type of kind of way to optimize your property that's emerging. And I think we have like the thought leaders in the category here. We did drop a little quick note into the, or kind of a handout into the side panel that you might have noticed. Also, just really quickly, what we were hoping to show today, and we'll share some materials out. We kind of thought we'd cover that COVID has accelerated everything around the conversions of short, medium, and long-term stays. Totally, remote work is here to stay. It's a huge, huge opportunity. Try to learn from the best. Colvire and others really, really know this stuff. Investments in the space, we could have talked about this one for a while too, but they're happening from the top up and bottom down. So I think, Omer, you mentioned this quickly, that Avalon and others are starting to get into the game, but there's obviously opportunity there. And then lastly, new revenue strategies, of course, are required to kind of maximize the effectiveness of this new traveler type. So thank you all for sharing your experience. Super fun to hear. Guests, thank you for joining us. You'll have an email soon with video. And with that, have a great rest of your day, all.